Okay, one more second here because there's more people joining. The number keeps going up, so let's just give them another second. But while we're waiting, Tracy, how you doing?
I'm doing good. Will, yourself?
Doing well. The new year started already. We're already.
Yeah, it's about to get hot and heavy. It's almost it's convention time and seminar time, and it comes on pretty quick.
It sure does. It sure does. And I think it's a good time, when you and I were talking about um, oh, chat is disabled. Oh, Q&A is open. How do I enable it? I don't know how to do that. All right, we'll have to just do Q&A. But Tracy and I were talking about like what topics to do because we really want to bring him in on a webinar, and it just seemed to fit the bill to talk about service technicians and training around service technicians. When I sent the invite out, I'm like, man, I wonder if people are going to think we're going to like train their techs on Centerpoint today. Hopefully that's not the case. So the
I hope
second
not.
email, I try to make it a little bit more clear that hey, we're going to talk about like general training on service tech. So let's kick this off. I think I'm recording. I better be recording because I do post these live, or I post these in the help center inside of Centerpoint. So a lot of new users in here. If you click on your little circle on the top right, there's a drop down. You can hit help center, and in there, there's all the articles. So I will post this as soon as I can there. So if you didn't catch it or want to share it, feel free to do so. But Tracy, thank you for spending some time with me. Hopefully, have a good conversation too. I think you'll probably do most of the talking. But why don't you introduce yourself and then we'll kick it off.
Oh, well, thank you very much. My name is Tracey Donnels. I'm with, like it says here, Service First Solutions. I've been in commercial roofing for just about 20 years, and I'm one of the few guys, I would say sometimes the dummies, who started in a service truck and continued in the service department and never left the service department. The first 15, 14 years of my career was spent at K-Post Company, where I grew our service department. Like I said, I started in a truck. I eventually served in every feasible role that one could serve in a service department while I grew there. And I eventually helped them grow their department 10 times the size of when I started to just around $9 million before COVID. Since I left K-Post, about almost 4 years, I've been doing Service First Solutions, where we go around the country and we help people do that exact same thing. Is we help them start, grow, and scale their service departments. Typically, we find that most service departments in the country, they operate like a food truck. They have one or two people in the back. They're really good at what they do. We don't have to talk to them a whole lot. They handle the problems, but they don't really have a whole lot of time to train or scale or do anything besides put out fires.
Mhm.
But when we can develop some procedures, some good standard operating procedures, train some good people, like we're talking about today, field technicians, and put those policies and procedures in place, we can turn that food truck into a Chick-fil-A drive-through and
Yeah.
really start to capitalize on not only the revenue, but the units. Not not only the revenue per unit, right? But just the number of units we can roll through a service department.
Yeah. No, I think that's a fair point too. So you literally kind of did every role, stuck with it and came up, which I think it puts you in a unique position because you know what techs go through, you know what service managers go through, you know what levels above that go through, and now here you are working with a lot of contractors. Our whole goal is to take all of best practices in the industry to not only continue to put that into our system, but to continue to provide that information to our customers. And watching that unfold and actually be impactful is a wonderful thing. I did open up chat. I haven't done this before, so don't get crazy on me here, people, but that might be interesting too. You can do questions. I'll field those for you and ask them as they come up.
Yeah.
But you guys can chat if you want to make mention of anything in particular or topic relevant to what we're going to talk about today. Chime in. So this being about dedicated training for technicians. What does that mean to you, training on techs?
So even though we use the word training, I really don't like the word training because I really think it comes down to practice. But so much of what we do, I'm going to go back to the Chick-fil-A model because I use it a lot of times. A lot of people understand it. Think about the units, the dollars that Chick-fil-A does, and the kind of procedures and people they have in place. They're just normal, everyday people. And sometimes I'll joke that Chick-fil-A is getting by using 14 and 87-year-olds because they all seem to be teenagers or elderly people, right? But they're just normal people who were trained on good practices. And the stuff we do in the service department, and I would argue even in the roofing industry, it's not rocket science. I'm not arguing that it's not difficult, because it definitely is difficult. I spent my time in a truck on Dallas roofs for nearly a year, scraping and spudding and do all that stuff. So I definitely know it's hot and it's hard. But again, it's not rocket science. It's not hard to understand. And so when we take good people who have good basic skill sets and apply some good training behaviors, some good training practices that have been developed and thought about ahead of time, and that happen routinely. That's why I go back to the practice, not necessarily the training. Once we go back to it routinely, it's amazing how fast we can train these guys, these people, women, men, whoever, to be efficient out in a service truck. And so often today, we're not we're not competing over jobs. I was at the Western States board meetings a few months ago, and somebody at a meeting said, "We're not competing for jobs anymore. We're competing for employees." And I don't know any successful roofing company that says, "No, I don't need any more employees." All the roofing companies I work with, they need more employees. So if all we're going to do is steal employees all day long, we're just going to raise our costs and we're going to lower our margins in the long run. But if we have a good training program that we can bring in people, good quality people who have some basic skill sets, we can train them into quality roof technicians very quickly. And I argue that we can train them to be a service foreman in less than 6 months. And that's where the key comes into the training of the technicians. We have to build those programs and put them in place to be able to achieve these goals and have that manpower that we can continue to pull from.
That's incredibly fair. I agree. When you say service foreman, you say service technician. Let's just make sure we're on the same page with that. The way we see it, or I see it, is there's service technicians, there's helpers under service technicians or labor, whatever you want to call it. But then service foreman is a step above the service technician. Is that how you look at it?
I kind of look at that as I typically refer to the tech. A lot of times that's how someone will refer to as the helper.
Yeah.
I really just don't like the term helper. I think if we use it, it slips out too much to our client base, and we don't want to project that we're sending a helper on site. I
Yeah.
always want us to project that I'm sending a service foreman and a trained service technician to the site. So I'm probably using technician as you would use the word helper.
Yeah.
Uh, and then foreman, some people use truck lead, someone like that. Someone who's responsible for making the decisions of the day-to-day operations of that truck.
Got it. Okay. And that's consistent too. And in a perfect world, both or more, however many people you have in the truck could do the work. We're always trying to bring
Yes.
everybody up. And we'll get into your checklist at some point too. I remember at the roofing company, just keeping track of every tech and who's good at what was always a challenge. You had a guy that's really good at shingles, but he couldn't do metal, or you got a guy that's really good at coatings and he doesn't know how to, torch. So
Yeah.
having a way or a method at least to keep track of what each tech or foreman can do in terms of skill set, and then continue to kind of work them up, right? Where they just might start off knowing how to weld TPO, but they don't know other roof systems. So, okay, well, if you learn more roof systems, you're more valuable to the company. So let's kind of keep
Sure.
up with that, which gets into kind of the way I think your philosophy will unfold here.
Yeah, I mean, it not only makes it so you're more efficient in your job, you can tackle more, but it's less trips per repair, right? If I have to send out two foremen to a job instead of only having to send one, or two different types of crews out to a job instead of just one, right? That's going to net me more money. If a crew that goes out on a job can not only do TPO and EPDM and modified and coatings, but they also know some metal, that makes them more valuable on that roof, and I can push that repair per truck number up. And let alone just not making mistakes, right? First, we're going to talk about, we're talking about growing revenue and doing extra stuff. But I mean, just when we get down to not making mistakes, if we can just do the basic stuff, I don't want to say perfect, but pretty much perfect all the time, it's amazing how much easier our life gets, right? And that kind of goes back to the whole practice idea, right? We're in the middle of NFL playoff time right now. When the NFL teams go to practice every day, every week, they don't practice the big, super fancy, trick plays all the time. If you go watch, they're practicing the blocking, the tackling, the running, the catching, all of the basics. And if we can just get a program down to teach those basics to those technicians and practice those basics with those same technicians, it's amazing how many times we're not getting cold welds in the field, right? We're not having an issue on the modified because we didn't let the membrane relax enough before we applied it because we're doing cold process, right? We treated the metal flashing properly before we applied the sealant, so now it's not gonna break its seal too early. So all
So
those kind of things go into all this, and it's like I said, it really comes down to the practice.
yeah, I like how you make that distinction too between practice and training. So to kind of put it in perspective, you're right. Crews are, we're not like sending them out to a dummy building, driving, getting in the truck, driving out to a dummy building, putting the ladder up, shaking the customer's hand, all that stuff. It's more doing the actual welding in the office or in the
Mhm.
shop. It's
Yeah,
controlling the torch and the cool down time it takes. Or so I like that. I like to try to draw some distinctions. Now, someone's asking too if a tech can be trained in 6 months for commercial roofing. Get
I
your
definitely think so. Now it depends on the tech. They have to want to do it, right? They have to. I look for the basic skills when I used to hire technicians. I didn't look for roofers. I looked for people who had driver's license, who could speak and write English, right? Because communication is service, right? That's the number one tool we use is communication. I wanted somebody who had a driver's license who could pass the background check. If they knew their way around a toolbox, that was enough.
Hmm.
I'll put you through the paces. We'll teach you how to roof. One of the most successful service estimators I ever had, and actually he's our other coach at Service First Solutions, was deathly afraid of heights when he started to be a roofer.
Yeah,
Right? And it's amazing how many other roofers I find that way. Right now, Adrian loves heights and stuff like that. But the stuff we're doing, as long as they're familiar with using tools, I mean, this is again, it's not rocket science. It's stuff we can practice, right? If a good analogy would be, let's say, sheet metal like downspouts. If I take a 4x4 downspout and I put it in a new person's hands with some snips, and I say, okay, watch me, and I'm going to put a boot on the end of this thing, then I want you to do it. The first one's going to look awful.
Mhm.
But if I let them practice that same skill 3 times in the span of 3 hours, it's amazing how much better that third one's going to get. Far too, and this is where I come back to the practice, right? Far too often with training programs I see, and this is all over the roofing industry, is come in for an hour, we're going to show you how to do it, and then good to go, you're certified.
Yeah,
Not any time to really chance to practice it or anything like that. The reason the entire industry got good at safety and good at putting on harnesses is because the safety director makes us practice putting on the harness in the new roofer orientation, right? We have to do it all the time. So if we don't practice these skills, it's really hard to advance, but then it's also very hard to advance quickly, and that's the key.
definitely agree with everything that you're saying too. And I feel like it's the actual skills and the technical aptitude, but
Mhm.
then couple that with the problem finding aspect. All right, the roof's leaking where? The ability to understand how that roof is put together and where water can even go, and that requires just general logic. I used to ask people if they were technicians that we were looking to potentially hire, if they were handy. Could you build stuff? Like if I had a
Mhm.
pile of lumber right here, could you construct a workbench? I think that certainly plays
Yep.
hand in hand. I agree. So 6 months, that's not out of the question. You
Yeah, and I would say that leak finding is the hardest thing to train. But again, so many people say, well, they're not good at training finding leaks because they haven't had enough experience. Well, experience is key. But also, just like you said, you have to go through the basics of how water travels and do a demonstration and, open up a roof, have some kind of presentation, some kind of documentation. A lot of the training programs we do for our customers, technicians, it's not only practice in the field outside, but we're going to talk about it inside as well. We're going to go through detailed drawings. We're going to ask you what's the difference between the Elevate detail and the Carlisle detail, because you need to know this. If we're out there putting warranted roofs down, we got to treat it the right way. Um, and like you said, that leak findability is the hardest. But again, I go back to let's think about really the work we do as a roofing service department. We all know there are hard leaks. Too many roofing companies can they find the hard leaks the level for admittance?
know,
We do so much work in the service department that is not difficult. It's follow the scope and top off pitch pans and do some sealant work, right? It's a metal deck with 1 inch of insulation and it's a 45 mil TPO roof. Not going to be that necessarily difficult to find some of these leaks and to do some of these repairs. Is the person 8 months in ready to tackle the third time leak on a concrete deck that has an IRMA EPDM system that's 18 years old? Not a chance, right? But again, that goes into scheduling and choosing the right job for the right person. We have C-level foremen out there, unfortunately. There's C-level work in the service department to put the C-level foreman on, and there's A-level work to put the A-level foreman on. And I would argue that most of the work we do in service is C and B level work.
I think that's fair. I think it's perfectly fair. So if you kind of go down your journey, um, where do you go next? Because one of your bullet points was what are we training on?
Correct. And we've touched on a little bit of that, right? Obviously, we need to work on the tools, right? The things we're going to be able to do, the repetitive motions we're going to be using on the roof, right? But also we need to remember to focus on the stuff that's not necessarily tool based. I go back to communication, right? So I really think you should have classes on communication, how you interact with customers, how you determine if the site contact you're talking to, if you can give them information or if you can't give them information. You've been in this business long enough. Sometimes your customer is the person paying the bill and they want your foreman to give them the straight dope on the roof. But sometimes your foreman is checking in with the manager of the Dolphin Pool Supply and they better keep their mouth shut,
Mhm.
right? Because we don't, but you have to train your guys on when to talk, when not to talk, or you got to know who to send where, right? Think about how many apps and systems we have to integrate with now or work with as a service department because of national clients or third party work from a roofing service provider or something like that, right? Most people, it might just be, I use my app, I use Centerpoint Connect, and this is what I know and love, and that's what 90% of my customers use. But for this customer, I have to use this certain check-in app. And for this customer, I have to use this certain check-in app because we do nationwide Lowe's work or nationwide Home Depot work, whatever it happens to be. All that stuff needs to be trained and practiced because all of that stuff is the stuff that causes us little bumps and hiccups in
Yeah,
the service department. And that's what we're trying to get rid of is the little bumps and hiccups. Um, so going back to what we train in the field, right? And this will kind of come back into when we get into the pay matrix as well, but it's the stuff we're doing all the time. You touched on the heat gun, the torch, right? I came up in Texas, right? We're still torching with 3 hands somehow in Texas. That's how much people are still torching here. And I know there's lots of places in the country that wouldn't touch a torch with a 10-foot pole. the waterproofing, the sealant, the spatulas, right? The tin snips, all that kind of stuff. We got to teach um, those repetitive tasks and repairs. When we started developing our programs, we tried a couple different ways and we weren't always successful. And I think that's one of the things that makes me a little bit better at the job I do now is I've made the wrong choices sometimes. But when we do training programs, we try to stick by, let's say, detail type, penetration type, right? So we might do a class on pipe flashings, let's say. A lot of times, pipe flashing is the very first class we do with companies because we want to do a class first that is easy and simple to understand. You don't want your first class of college to be some super advanced class that's just you want it to be a little bit introductory. And I understand where I sit down and I understand the pace. And I understand when I come in here on Thursdays, we're going to be looking at this and then going outside and putting the tools to work, so on and so forth. So for a typical pipe flashing class, we might go through several different details of TPO, PVC, EPDM pipe flashings, maybe some PMMAs or some coatings, right? That are either popular in their area or maybe that contractor uses a lot or that they see a lot. Um, Ask questions, get the team interacting. How many fasteners do we need for this? When do we use a T-seam cover? How big does the target patch have to be? Like I said before, what's the difference between the Elevate and the Carlisle detail, so on and so forth. And after we're doing that training, that interaction in the office, and that includes, like I said, the PowerPoint hopefully up on the TV, we also hand paper out because a lot of our service foremen won't admit to I can't see the screen.
Mhm.
So we don't give them any, we put it right in their hands. Sometimes they take notes and they ask questions, they thumb through it. It's amazing what happens when we give them a little collateral. But then after the interior portion or the inside portion, then hopefully we have mock-ups made and we're going out back and practicing. And there is always something for every level of roofer to practice. And we'll use the pipe examples for the exact same example. So I'm brand new. I'm just going to do a uh, Carlisle pipe boot, and I'm going to heat water around the edges and seal the top, and that's what I'm going to do. But then maybe the next time I come to the class, or someone more a little advanced is going to do a field wrap of a 6-inch pipe. Maybe someone a little bit more advanced is going to do a field wrap of a 2-inch pipe because that's going to be harder,
Mhm.
right? Maybe the person who thinks they're hot crap, they really think they know what they're doing, they're going to do a 1-inch pipe with PVC flashing. See if they can do that.
There you
And
go.
then the people that really, because there are some people who don't need practice on the tool. Well, then what their job is going to be is they're going to be in charge of these 3 people and they're going to make sure they do it right.
Mhm.
So then they're going to get practice being a teacher, a leader, a foreman, so on and so forth. And sometimes the foremen aren't the best at the ones doing the tools, right? I know every roofer that has more than 5 or 6 crews, they got one technician who is just great, but he doesn't want to be a foreman, right? He
Yeah.
might be great on the tools, right? So then we're getting the idea of, becoming a better leader and seeing others perform. It builds a little camaraderie as well, because we get to experience other people's work. And I didn't think that guy was very good, but I saw the gutter work he was doing, and he's really slick with that metal. Then maybe the next time I do some metal work, I'm going to ask my boss if he can be my helper. Or, that's Sammy. That Sammy really knows his stuff about EPDM. Next time I can't get Will on the phone, I'm going to call Sammy and ask him a question because he amazed me, right? And it kind of builds that teamwork and that camaraderie.
Yeah, I like that. And you're also kind of sharing the load too of education, and I often say this in roofing, like all in roofing in companies, a lot of the time it seems this way, that all the information is really top heavy, like the roofing knowledge, like the top level of the company. What I mean by that is the guys that can actually spec out an entire roof system, the guys that know how to problem solve everything. And how do you relay that downstream to the best of your ability? If you look at the service department specifically, you got certain guys good at different things where you can kind of information share that is what you're talking about. And
Hmm.
I think sometimes that even includes switching up the crews. If you got somebody
Yes.
weak in metal, you can send them with this other crew that's about to go do a full day worth of metal work. That's a good use of of time. But you're right when you were talking about the communication skills, because there's skills, you hit on that. There's a
Mhm.
communication aspect, but the communication aspect's huge in itself because it requires a lot of things. You're trying to get rid of the little road bumps, and the road bumps become significant bumps.
Yeah.
Especially all these systems with it could be core ego, SMS assist, it could be service channel. They all have different protocols. So can your tech complete that, whatever requirement is, and get out and still
Yeah.
up?
Yeah, and if you think about it, right, we go back down that road of applications, apps, communication. That is the stuff. If a car has to sit and not move in the Chick-fil-A drive-through line for 10 minutes, what does that do to the entire system, right? If our coordinators have to drop everything they're doing to fix something because the foreman doesn't know what to do or did the wrong thing, what does that do for the rest of the system as they're playing air traffic controller in the department? So another thing we often do, like I said, when we're practicing the communication, is we'll put the foreman through uh, uh, I want to say a training, but almost like a role playing seminar where we'll give them work orders in their system. As you know, we work with Centerpoint customers. So if we were going to go work with a Centerpoint customer, we might give the foreman each tickets, and they have to come into the roofing shop and let's say I'm going to pretend to be the contact. And
Mm,
let's say Tracey Donnels is your site contact. There's a leak in the lobby. And they got to call me and say, okay, Tracey, I'm almost there. I'm 5 minutes away. I'll meet you out front. And then it's 100% role playing.
I like
And
that.
we stage it ahead of time so we can do it really quickly. So what we'll do is we'll walk them through the building or whatever. And this is we'll walk them through. We'll say, well, here's the lobby leak and there's the leak. And we'll put a blue sticky note on the ceiling because a lot of times our training involves take a picture of the interior leak. So now they have something to take a picture of. And hopefully we would have went up on the roof ahead of time and put a red sticky note somewhere up there and written something on it that says, hole in roof. And what they have to do is they have to walk the person through, document the interior conditions of whatever their system is, however they do it within their roofing company, then go up on the roof, do all the documentation, use the Centerpoint app, Centerpoint Connect app in your case, do all the documentation, and before they're going to take a picture, they take a picture of that before picture with the red sticky note, and then we give them green sticky notes to put over top, and then that's their after photo.
Mm.
But then they're practicing the entire process, and at the end they have to call up their contact and say, "Hey, Tracy, I'm done doing the roof work. Do you want to come up here and look at it, or do you want me to show you the pictures down below?" So again, they're getting practice interacting with that customer, and we get to ask them questions, and they get to think on their feet and stuff like that. And we can get a whole quote unquote leak visit. You can do it in a half hour, and if they don't do so well, hey, guess what? We're going to move these sticky notes around and you got another work order in Centerpoint and we're going to do it again to
Yeah.
get that repetition down. And that's the only way we get better. If analogy I always use all the time is when mom and dad were training us how to ride a bike, they didn't show us one time and say, okay, now ride your happy butt up and down Main Street and tell me when you get better. No, they showed us several times. They gave us a chance to fall down and get back up again. And they gave us some coaching and we got to try it a lot of times. Too often in roofing, it's, hey, here's your 30-minute training and now go do it perfectly on the roof.
Yeah, I think I really like what you're doing by taking it from A to Z. And when we're training contractors, we're training them how to use the software. So there's gaps in that. We're heavily reliant on the contractors to fill those gaps. And I've heard of creative solutions like, all right, you're going to go around and kind of do a scavenger hunt, but or you're going to do this. But ultimately, what they need to do is to go from A to Z and do it properly. A meaning check your system. All right, here's my schedule. Open the ticket. I'm punching in when we're actually on our way. I'm punching in when we're actually there. I'm taking the right before photos, the right after. I'm choosing the right descriptions. All that matters. So if you can't have them go all the way through to the end, it's just going to elongate the training process.
Yes, yes. And again, I said repetition. right? And whatever these processes are, these trainings are, whether it's communication, an app, third-party apps, uh, picture taking classes, right? I've had entire classes on taking pictures, let alone all of the skills that we'll get into here a little bit. Skylight measuring classes. That's
Mm.
a good cost-effective way to waste money. Mismeasure skylights on a routine basis. That's a great one.
Yeah.
But whatever it is, we like to develop a training schedule, and have a training plan or it's on the calendar for once a month. And after we get these programs, the first one built, okay, we build TPO, and then we build pitch pans, and then base flashings and curbs, and then drains, and then customer communications, and then maybe a little waterproofing, and then some metal, and then a photo class. Well, then we get this library. And now it's, hey, training's next week. What is either on the calendar for us to do, or what hasn't looked so great lately that we should do a touch-up class from? Right?
Mm.
Oh, you know what? Drains have looked not so greatly. Let's do a drain class, right? Or the documentation in Centerpoint probably could have been a little bit better over this last rainy season. So maybe we should touch base on that before this next rainy season, right? Or maybe we're going to do something different.
Yeah.
Right? We're going to do something different in Centerpoint. We're going to take advantage of some of the new functionality, and we got to go over it with the guys. But we have that on the schedule every month. We can move it around, but at least then it's on the calendar, and we know we need to do it.
Well, I feel like a lot of contractors fear, it sounds great. Yeah, I need my guys to go through training. I'm going to do it. But I feel like a lot of contractors have that they don't want to stop what they're doing, right? Don't want to stop the guys from working. So what's the justification in, all right, I'm shutting down the service department for an hour or an hour and a half plus travel,
Mhm.
whatever it is. Um, I mean, it's clear, it's there, it's worth it, well worth it. But maybe just highlight the justification for why to do that.
Yeah, and I think you can look at it on both sides of, let's say, the monetary spectrum, right? Whether it's making more money because we are increasing our gross margin because we're getting jobs done faster, because now we have two people that can run the tools, or the person who could run the tools can run them better, or they have additional skills, or we don't have to call in a high dollar sheet metal foreman to do these relatively simple downspout boots or gutter corners or stuff like that, whatever happens to be. So there's right there we can raise our not only our revenue by doing more services, creating more, doing more repairs from the same set of hands, but also doing that work faster because we are practicing it. Well, now think about if we're practicing it, hopefully we're not making as many mistakes. And in the service world, that is not only missed opportunities. I didn't fix the right thing, so I have to go back. And we all know what a go back costs us. And if you don't, you should. That's something with all these systems and CRMs now, we can track what an average go back costs us, or a warranty service call, or however it's referred to in our companies. But when we have to send two men or two people back to do anything, in most metropolitan areas, you ain't getting anything done in less than 2 men, 3 hours.
Yeah.
That's 75% of a man day. So that's hundreds of dollars. So you can start to calculate the return on investment by doing these trainings pretty quickly and looking and seeing, well, how many problems are we having that we're having to go back and fix on our own dime? But also, how many more dimes can we make because we're having a little bit more skill set coming out of those service fans?
Yeah, fair, totally fair. I think too, something to consider is like what to train on. And I think that it goes back to, well, what's the type of work that you do? If you don't do any metal, well, okay, maybe you don't need that as a skill, but
Mhm.
maybe take a look at all of the roofs that you service or that you install. Like define your skill set requirements first. Because we used to
Yep.
be guys that came in that only knew TPO because they came from companies that only did TPO. So we had to teach them the other systems, but they didn't need to learn everything. It's like, who's your customers? What kind of roofs do your customers have? And then have that be your like default set of requirements.
Mhm. And right now might be a good time to, talking about what's your skill set, what kind of roofs you do, might be a good time to bring up that skills matrix. Because a big part of this is not only knowing what to train, but to how do we get people on board to do it? And one of the things that I found really successful was putting together a pay plan that rewarded guys based on those skills that they acquired doing those trainings. Um, and so, for example, what we would do is we would say, hey, if you come in as a sales or a service technician, your bottom line pay is X and your top line pay is Y. But if you gain skills through our training program, you're going to gain pay. You're going to be able to up your pay. And no, even though in a roofing company, most people know what everybody else makes. But what this allowed was a plan for young people to come in and say, oh, well, now I know why it's worth it for me to go to these training sessions and why it's worth it for me to pay attention and why it might be worth it to take a little bit more time in the field or something like that. So this plan you have in front of me is totally made up numbers and totally old. You'll
Okay.
notice I have a technician level and a foreman level. And this is kind of the way we would work it. So first we came up with our pay matrix. And when we develop matrices, a lot of times roofers know what their bottom pay is and they know what their top pay is.
Is
They
that
know,
the
oh, I pay a foreman between X and Y, but they don't really know what makes up the difference between X and Y. So what we do is we sit down with people and we say, okay, well, what are the major things you want these two positions to be able to do? So if you notice, those are the skills we have. So across foreman, we want them to be badgeable. We want them to be able to drive. We want to have them some leadership skills. We want them to be able to fix roof leaks. Sorry about that. We want them to have advanced metal skills, tile glazing, so on and so forth. And down below, we have technician. And the technician, if you look at the stuff that's down there, is really the baseline stuff that we're teaching to our roofing technicians, right? How well do they use the torch? How well do they use the heat gun? How well are they on sealants, three courses, shingles, metals? How well do they hustle? How reliable are they? So what we did is we developed what was important to us. And then when we know what is important to us, whether it be four things, five things, or 10 things, we can start to devise what's more important based on money and stuff like that and how much weight everything carries.
Yeah, I like that. When I first saw it too, because of the verbiage discrepancy, I was a little confused, but that makes perfect sense now. So the base requirements of a service tech are fulfilling the majority of the duties that are required for a service truck to be out there. But then the
Correct. And when
advanced,
I show this to a lot of people and I say, if you have somebody who can do all the stuff in a technician's level, what are they? And a lot of people look at me and say, yeah, they're foremen. And I
hmm,
said, yes, exactly. That's what we're trying to train these people to be foremen. And then once they are foremen, once they can handle most of the work we do, then we're going to work on making them really good, right? Some advanced metal skills, some tile skills, some silicone glazing on windows, tuck pointing, getting into stuff that's just beyond just the normal roofing service. But then once we have these skills, once we know what we want to do, well, now we can start to decide what to train on, how to design our programs, right? If we're not going to reward based on, let's say, coding, we don't do any codings. I don't need to build a training program on coding. So now I've decided what's important in my department. Now I can design training programs. I can have those training programs. And now here comes the key to, I think, everything. Testing day. And what we did for testing day is we'd invite the guys in and we'd say, hey, let us know what you want to test on, what you think you've gotten better on. And then we're going to go ahead and test you on it. And if you pass the test, you get the money. So, for example, and all of these skills have to have for the test, they have to have milestones. You have to have a way to judge this. So, let's take the torch. That's a great one, right? The torch on this example is worth $2. I would break that into four different levels. Do you have your torch card, your Certa card? You get 50 cents. If you can do small patches, you get $1. If you can do small penetrations, you might get $1.50. And if you can do an entire curve, an entire scope with that torch, you might be worth the highest level. So on testing day, we'd invite the guys in and they'd say, "Hey, boss, I'm currently at this level. I think I could be at this level." And they'd come and they do the certification, pass the test using our mock-ups, the same mock-ups we use to train these guys on. They're all set up. The superintendent sees that they pass the test within the time allotment. They sign off, and the guys get the raise the next week. After we instituted this plan, this testing day plan, the first time, the involvement in the trainings after that increased two or threefold
Hmm.
because they realized that we had a system and they believed in the system.
Yeah, I mean it makes perfect sense too, because it's when you have torch as a requirement for the technician, you're expecting that whatever roof you send them out on, if it requires a torch, they're going to be able to solve it. They're going to be able to do it. But
Yeah,
the big difference of torching in the field versus torching around a curb or torching around a parapet. But I think it's wise to break up everything that you require into its own category. And this probably require a service manager and owner to just spend the time to put this sheet together. But
definitely.
in the categories themselves, break it down even further. Welding. All right, we can weld field seams. Can we weld details? Can we weld
Yeah.
curves? So those
What is the milestone? And
milestones.
we really found ourselves increasing the milestones as we got better because all of a sudden it was like, well, we can't let this be the milestone. Guys learn this too fast. So we had to increase the milestones and nobody really cared because we had the training behind it. And all of this stuff, right? Even like the app use, right? That can be trained. You can have practice on that, right? And a lot of times that's the one thing that limits a lot of people from going to be a foreman, not one in driving.
Yeah.
Um, and you'll notice some of the stuff on the technician, like some of the stuff is pretty, we had that was pretty easy to succeed at. Three coursing is the example. I wanted a guy who was coming into his first testing session who didn't know anything about roofing the first time he got hired 2 months ago to pass some kind of test the first time and
Hmm.
have them get something for it. It's like, oh, I understand this, and now I'm going to try to do more.
Yeah. I mean, it makes sense. So when you do that certification or in your training processes, are you physically rewarding them with acknowledging them? When you say rewarding them so that they feel that they won, what does that look like?
So a lot of times we would know in the next meeting, we would either have a list or I know some people, some companies do it, they put it in they put in their company newsletters. They might, we would acknowledge it in our service meetings with the guys, but I know some companies will put it in their service newsletters. They might say Tracy Donnels passed his torch certification level 4 last week, and Will Riley passed his tuck pointing certification, whatever it happened to be. And they might put that in some kind of a company-wide newsletter or something like that. Beyond obviously, making sure the money gets right on their checks right away. Because that's the things that guys would not forget. And like I said, the attention to training and those sessions would increase tenfold. And that would also help me hire because now I had people saying, not only being able to come in and let's say the guy comes in, he says, "Hey, I know everything." Well, now I show them the pay matrix and I say, "Well, this is how I pay. I don't care what you want. This is how I pay."
Hmm.
And most people come in thinking they know everything and say, "Yeah, no problem. I'm going to get paid top of the line." I'm going to say, "Okay, now we're going to have you verify it." And out of all the people that I had take the job for less money, I mean, let's see, of all the people that didn't pass the test, right, to acquire the money they thought they were going to get, I only had one person not take the job. And I attribute that to them believing, oh, this guy has a system that if I get these skills that I was trying to, BS him on a little bit before, but if I get those skills, he's going to he's going to pay me for it. And he's probably heard from his friends in the industry or stuff like that. I overheard a conversation, one of my roofers saying, "Hey man, you wouldn't believe what just happened to me. I just got to go into my boss and prove that I knew more than he thought I knew, and I got a raise because of it. They're almost like bragging to their friends of this system, right? And that's fine, right? As long as it gets me more qualified people to fill my truck so I can build my revenue or build my gross margin, whatever it takes.
Yeah, I mean it keeps it all in check because you don't have to take something at face value or just hope that they're right and send them out and learn over a long period of time that perhaps maybe they don't know everything, but kind of prove it in a controlled environment. It's a system that keeps itself in check, and it's a way for them to earn more and know what they're going to earn. So I love it. I'm a big fan. So there's a couple of questions in here. David
Okay.
Daniel saying. Training on specialty leak detection tools and documenting them. Tramax, Me Plus, FLIRs, etc. is also crucial.
So yeah, there's different tools that you're maybe not gonna pull out every time you're doing a leak detection. There are a lot of people that are, let's say, doing scans of roofs at certain times, or they're doing electro tools where they can find the leaks using different kinds of tools. And I think those are definitely important in the industry. I don't think you're gonna put those necessarily on a truck. But it is something that I think someone in the probably department needs to know how to use. But ultimately, it's just like anything in the industry, right? I remember when we started doing uh, different kinds of PMMAs and stuff like that. And some of those first ones that came out, you had to be really careful on the mixing and stuff like that, and the temperatures and stuff like that. And at first, we only trust two people to do it. But then eventually we trust four and five and six. So I definitely think there is more specialty training that is available, especially if you embrace that tool or you use that tool. If you're using drones all the time, if you're not, whatever those tools you have available, there should be classes set aside to train those. One we didn't even talk about equipment, right? I can get a SkyTrack license from Ahern, but that doesn't mean I'm not going to drive it into somebody's building because I haven't practiced enough.
Yeah.
So that's another one we would do that one often. And for that one, the equipment people would even bring us equipment to practice with.
Oh, that's nice. Yeah, or backing up
Yeah.
a trailer with a SkyTrack on it. That's
Yes. Yes.
important. Can you drive a truck and trailer? Yes. All right. Here's a $120,000 setup. Go ahead and
Yeah. Now let's do it.
don't crash it. All right, another one. Kyle Price, did you share some version of this matrix with the teams? I can share it. Yeah, I think we
Okay.
can
That's no problem. Yeah.
shoot anyone that wants that, shoot me an email, shoot Tracy an email, and we'll kick it over to you. What'll be really cool, here's what I'll do. I will kick it over to our marketing team, and I'll make them make it a blank fillable form. Maybe I can make a
Yeah.
worksheet out of it or something with
Yeah.
the
Fine.
4 levels too, but I'll send the one that you have here for
Mhm.
anyone that's got pretty much already built, so that's kind of nice.
Yeah.
Okay, Tracy, Will, what do you think about the new Service Pro? Oh,
Pro
Pro.
certification.
Okay, okay.
Yes. Funny enough, I was actually on the committee that designed the Service Pro certification. And also funny enough, the first foreman to pass the pro certification test through NRCA was trained using the pay matrix that we were just talking about
That's
because he was one of my previous foremen at K-Post, a guy named David Jimenez. Um, but the pro certification, I think, is going to be good, but it's going to take the industry to get very good. I think it can work really well right now as an internal recognition as these are our best service foremen. But the pro certification model was really based upon trying to get building owners, consultants, architects, GCs to want more roofers with that pro certification. I don't know if that's going to come. I hope it definitely does. But the pro certification, it is that. It is certification. It is not training. I have had some people come to me and say, "Hey, I want my foreman to be able to pass the pro certification test." And I
hmm,
said, well, then you need to call Service First Solutions and we'll start working with you on building training programs and all
there
that
you
kind
go.
of stuff that's going to allow them to pass that test. right? So I definitely do think it's worthwhile, not for every company and not for every person within your company, but for those guys that you say, hey, I want to recognize these people. And that means a lot to the industry. And I think sometimes it means a lot more to the people that get recognized, to the people that are trying to recognize them.
Yeah, I think it's fair. I think when a service department gets to a certain size where you need that, that superintendent role in the field, perhaps that's a better
Yeah.
suited certification because you want that knowledge. I think a lot of companies start off with that knowledge base internally, but then
Hmm.
you have so many trucks out in the field that you gotta kind of bring it out there and have mobility to go out and support them. But if you do the training program, you probably don't really need too much of that if every foreman is truly a foreman.
Yeah. I had when we were at our biggest, I think I had 25 trucks running. And I remember having 8 guys at the time. We would call it our Black Ops guys.
Mm.
Right. And they were our best of the best. They're the guys that they went out there, they make all the calls. We trust them. They called me up and say, "Hey Tracy, this is what I'm doing," I'm like, "Okay, well, you're at a level that I trust what you're doing." Those are kind of like the level of guys that I probably would have put this level, this put through you. Like you said, your top end guys.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Anyone else have questions? Jot them in. We do have some time left, and what I want to do is just bring up kind of something cool. So you're going to be talking here at this ServiceCon
Yeah.
event. What are you going to be bringing to the table?
So what I'm going to be talking about is one of the things that I think what allowed me to be very successful running my service department is I was able to go and visit other roofers while I was coming up and walk through their businesses, ask them questions, and see how they operated within their walls. My previous boss at the time would often send me all over the country. And I might be going to IRE or MRC, but while I was there, I was going to go see this roofer or that roofer. Or I remember one time being sent on a tour of 5 roofing companies in Florida in one week. And what that allowed me to do is it allowed me to come back and take all kinds of tips and tricks from walking behind the curtain of all these roofers and seeing how are they successful, what they tried that they didn't work. And I think far too often in the industry, our service people don't get that opportunity. We meet some people, we go to a conference, we hear about some cool ideas, and we meet this person, they have 2 trucks, and then we talk to them again in 4 years and they have 8 trucks. But we don't really see what that transition is like. So what I want to try to do is I want to try to take customers or their service people that are joining us the behind the transitions of what it's like to go from, let's say, a 2-person staff of like office staff to 3 to 4 to 5. And how do we split out those roles? How does 2 people taking care of a department split into 4 people? And now what does everybody do?
Yeah.
And how do we decide when is it time to add that third person or add that fourth person? Um, I will tell you that the timing is different all across the country, but almost who departments add, or I would say what position they add across the country, is astonishingly uniform, and capacities as well. What a really good service coordinator can handle as far as trucks, right? Scheduling trucks, or how many bids a service estimator who's getting out on the roofs can put out a week, right? All that stuff has become pretty uniform. And if we watch it, if we track it with a good scorecard, we can know when it is time to go from 3 people to 4 people and how we're going to split up those roles and who's going to do what. And that's what I really want to talk about is how do we scale those departments and what does it look for the internal roles, not the sales, the revenue. We obviously know we sell more, we need more trucks. That's the easy one, right? When our 2 people in back have too much to do, how do we get them a third person and what do they do and how do we make it work? And then after we keep growing, how do we add a fourth person and a fifth and a sixth and what do they all do?
I love it. I think it's good. The whole goal is to not only go over it, but to do it in a way where everyone listening could walk away with some action items. So we got some cool stuff coming to kind of support that initiative. So yeah, looking forward to it. Anything else that you want to bring up. Let me just check the questions, make sure we're good. Any last minute questions, feel free to jot them in. Otherwise, we're gonna be leaving here in just a minute.
Yeah, the only thing I would say is hopefully that everybody signs up for Service Con. And like I said, it's about time to hit the road. So if anyone's going to the Duralast event next week, I will be there. Service First Solutions will be there. And I'll also be at the Chicago Roofing Contractors Association next week and IRE next month. And I'm sure you'll be at IRE as well.
We are. I'm excited for IRE because we doubled the booth size because you know, we just had to. But
That's
it's a
awesome.
good one.
Awesome.
I'm looking forward to it. So we'll do this again. You think of the next topic. We'll bring you on. But I do owe all of our clients some updates too. So my next webinar, try to do one next week. And I'm going to go through what we did in 25, right? Like what did we really accomplish in 25? It was a big building year, trying to redo some things to gain efficiencies. I feel like to put it in perspective, you're talking about kind of stopping and training so that way we can be more efficient, make more money. Well, we did the same thing. It was like we had to kind of pause and train and rebuild. And now I'm excited for 25. So thank you, sir. We'll
Awesome.
catch you
Thank
on
you, Will.
the next one.
Sounds good. Take care.
See y'all.